Fight!
Hey everybody, this is what a battle between Venom and Spiderman looks like in 2024, and it's a little bit depressing. So this is my basic ofrenda, little Flight of the Conchords quote for you. We're going to start with the blockout, move on to detailing, pose, print prep, and kind of go in that order for both of these characters. So let's dive right in. This is intended for an absolute beginner. So I'm going to cover the basics of navigation. So we've got this launched up right now, and this is what it starts us out with. So now if you were to just hide this, or this didn't pop up for you, and you were to just left click and drag, you'd see these weird little squares. And that's typical since, you know, the very first version of ZBrush. ZBrush fancies itself both a 2D and a 3D software. But we know their secrets. We know that it's a 3D beast. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over here to get that menu to pop up. We'll come up here on the Lightbox Tools and click that button. And then we're going to start with a mesh. So I don't need to start from a sphere or just start just kind of pushing a sphere around. I can actually start with a humanoid character. And I found that a good one that has good topology and everything is this Nick Z Human. So let's double click on this guy. And it's going to load that up for us in our, over here on the right hand side in our tools. So if we left click and drag now on our screen, we're going to pull out this character, right? And if you keep doing it, it's going to keep pulling out these different characters. And you're like, why isn't it 3D? It's kind of like in 2D mode still. Well, that's because we haven't switched into 3D. So I'm going to undo this. I'm going to left click and drag. And then after I've clicked, I'm going to hit T on my keyboard. T is in Tango, okay? And now if I right click to rotate around, or hold Alt plus right click to pan, or Alt plus right click, and while I'm panning, let go of Alt and continue to drag your mouse to zoom. This is how you navigate around your character. So once again, just to review, right click, rotates around, Alt plus right click, pans, Alt plus right click, and then as you're panning, let go of Alt and continue to drag the mouse and you'll zoom in and out. It's a little bit tricky, but hang in there. If you need a shoulder to cry on, I'm here for you. So, you can also use this character over here. You can just click this head and it'll snap to the different orthographic views and perspective views. Or you can hold shift while you're rotating and it'll snap to the nearest orthographic view, okay? And we notice if we snap to the side here, we're seeing some perspective. We're seeing the foot behind. Say we want to be in a 3D orthographic view or a flattened view. If you hit P on your keyboard, you'll switch to an orthographic view. And this is really handy if you're working with symmetrical modeling. This is what you're going to want to work in. But if you want to see it with some nice perspective, just hit P and you'll switch back to perspective. Okay, so let's say we got our character way over here and it's off screen and we want to get it back on screen. You can come over here and click frame to frame him up, or you can just hit F as in Frank on your keyboard and it'll frame him right up. Okay, so that's the basics of navigation. And just if we come over here to our sub tool, we can click on the sub tool. So a tool in ZBrush is a collection of sub tools. Okay, it's a bunch of little chunks, little pieces of your character, and you'll see as I click through these, they'll kind of light up. You'll see the hair lights up when I click on the hair. That means that's the active sub tool. So if I were to left click and drag, it's only going to sculpt on the hair and not the body, because undo that, because the body is on this sub tool. Okay. So let's pull that guy out now. All right, so we only want to have this one subtool. We want to just steal this body geometry, okay? And the way I'm going to do that is with the click of a button. So I'm going to click Make Polymesh 3D right here. Click that guy. Okay, so now you'll notice that all of my other subtools went away because we don't need them. So we don't need the teeth or any of that stuff. We'll make our own teeth for Venom later on. But if you click over here, because these are your actual full tools, you can click back over to that guy. It still exists. But we've made another fancy tool with just this one body mesh by clicking on that Make Polymesh 3D button. So this is what we like. We're going to come back over here, and to remove all confusion, we'll scroll down on our subtool. We have a bunch of options down here. So we're going to hit delete, just delete that button, or click that button to delete. Whoops, pardon me. Delete all is the button that we want. So click on that guy, and now that tool has completely disappeared. And I just wanted to remove all the confusion so we know exactly which tool we're clicking on. So it switches by default over to the other tools when you hit delete. So right, it switches to this one, but we want to be on this guy here, okay? So hopefully that's clear, and I'm not speaking too quickly. But now we've got our subtool, and he's ready to go. He's ready to rock. So let's say we want to make sure that we're sculpting symmetrically, right? So we only have to do half the work. So if I sculpt over here, the work gets done over there. And right now it's already set to that by default. You can see the little red button. On occasion, you'll want to switch that off because we don't want everything to be perfectly symmetrical within our sculpts. That's kind of amateur hour. So in order to switch that button on and off, just hit X as an X-ray on your keyboard, okay? And for the most part, we're gonna want that on, but just make sure that you're aware that that's the hotkey, and always be sure to confirm that you're working with symmetry on, because that can be a gotcha, a major gotcha inside ZBrush, okay? So again, let's switch over to the brushes now and start talking about those. So if I were to left click and drag on his head and pull these cool bumps out, right? That's because we're using the standard brush over here on the left-hand side in the upper left corner, okay? And so if we click on there, we're using the standard brush, and it's popping out his forehead, all fun. And if we hold Control or Alt, excuse me, we will go inward, okay? It'll go in. So left-clicking on the mesh goes out, and Alt goes in, okay? And the way you can change that operation, if you want it to be default sub to go in, you can click on the Z sub right here. Okay, and it'll just be in by left clicking, and then in this case you need to hold Alt to bring the mesh out. Okay, so we'll just undo these cool horns. You can adjust your brush intensity right here by dragging the slider. I'm gonna switch this back to Z add. So now it's really intense. Okay, and then oops, you can also adjust your draw size, the overall size of your mesh. Yikes. Cool. And you can do that here, or you can come down here and you can hit S in the viewport, and you can just drag this guy left and right to switch your draw size. I prefer that method. You can also adjust the focal shift, so we can make this a little point right here, so it's a little bit pointier within our cursor space, and then that's an option as well. You can do this with all your different types of brushes. And what are all the brushes? Well, we can come over here to the brushes and click on this, and it's going to bring up this big scary menu. Just be sure to not worry, because you're only going to use 4 or 5 of these brushes, all right? I love the Move Topological brush. I love the Snake Hook brush. I love the Damn Standard brush. I love H Polish is a great brush. And I have these all set to my hotkeys across the top of my keyboard, 1 through 0, okay? How do I do that? Well, you can come over here to the brush menu, and if you click on this little icon right here, it'll dock it to the side, so it'll stay up open for you, okay? And I'm gonna come over here to the brushes, and I'm just gonna click through these guys, okay? Just click through them. Just select these brushes, so Move Topological. And another pro tip is, if you know the name of the brush, like say it's the Snake Hook brush, but you don't know where to find it here in this mess, you can hit S on your keyboard, and it'll isolate all the S brushes. And it looks like there's a little orange H in the top left corner there. And if you hit H, it'll switch you to that brush. Just hit skip there. And now it's switched me to the Snake Hook brush. So I love the Move Topological. So I'm going to hit M, and then I'm going to hit J to switch to Move Topological. Okay, so just continue to select these brushes. And the reason I'm doing this is because when I click these brushes and use them, it keeps them in a history right here. Okay, and that's what I want. So we'll do pinch. I love me some pinch. So Damien Standard. And then the way that you set these to a hotkey on your keyboard, in this case I have mine all set 1 through 0. You can hold Control Alt and then left click on these, and you'll see a prompt at the top of the screen that says press any key combination to assign. In this case, with the clay brush selected, I will now hit, say, 2 on my keyboard, and that'll be the new hotkey for me. Okay. So for me, I have standard. I have the standard brush set to 1. I have the Damien Standard again. So Control Alt, left click on that, and when that little prompt up top is active, you hit 2 on your keyboard, and it's going to say, oh, for me it's already assigned, so don't worry about it. And so clay buildup is number 3, so I'm going to hit Control Alt, and then I hit 3 on my keyboard, and now when I hit 3 over here, it's going to switch to the clay buildup. So it's very important that you do that. It's going to speed up your workflow, make things more efficient for you. And now let's actually get to some sculpting, okay? So first, let's maybe test some of these brushes. So I love the snake hook brush for moving my forms around and doing big form detailing. So I have the snake hook as active. I have hit S on my keyboard and brought my draw size to be a larger size. And I'm just moving his shoulders in. And I think for now what we're gonna do, if I Alt-Tab back to my concept, look how jacked Venom is. I mean, this guy's a monster. So he's almost like a big sphere with arms, okay? So let's try and get these details, and let's think of like, what kind of brush can we use to bring those to increase his overall mass. And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I want to inflate him like a balloon, right? So it's a miracle. There is an actual, I'm going to close this guy now because we can always just click on these little arrows here to minimize that. We can always come over here and say, oh, inflate. So I'm going to say I, which is right there, and then N to make that a brush. And this is one of my default brushes too, by the way. And now if I left click on this guy, I can just inflate him out, just make him super chunky, okay? So I'm using a combination right now of inflate, and then when you'll notice that my cursor switches blue. And this is a backup brush that I have set, the ZBrush has set automatically when I hold the shift button. So if you push down shift, your cursor will switch from red to blue. And my backup brush in this case right now is this smooth brush, which is a very commonly used brush. I highly recommend you maintain that in your backup brush settings. And we're losing some of this detail, but I'm not worried about it because we're going to get that back. So what I'm going to do is continue to inflate things. And then using my snake hook brush to kind of pull my proportions, give him some big long monkey arms, okay? And it's gonna look pretty bad initially. You have to kind of get past that as an artist. It's just gonna look real crazy initially. And one thing that is difficult to kind of wrap your brain around is you have to make sure you rotate a lot when you're working in 3D, okay? And one thing that people tend to do is they just camp out in this view. They'll stay in this view. And then when they look over here, it'll look super goofy. So I've got my concept. He has a little bit of a belly. He's very, very kind of thick through the torso. So I'm just going to try to achieve that. And don't worry about like losing some of these facial details because it's Venom and he's not really going to have those details. So I'm going to come back over here to my inflate brush and actually inflate his face out. We're not going to need his ears either. So I'm going to use H polish and just kind of push those ears back against his face and just flatten those out. Look at that. It just kind of went away. And I'm liking that right now. So we'll just do this for now. And again, it doesn't matter what the topology is doing right now at this point. If you're already a 3D artist, you're thinking, oh, what is he doing? This is a mess. It doesn't matter because we're doing this for a print, for a 3D print. We don't need to worry about things like topology at this point. It might be beneficial to maintain this topology so that we can, keep our symmetrical modeling and things. But for right now, let's just make it look cool. Because ZBrush always has there's always a good backup. There's always a good workflow. So for whatever you need to do. So I'm just trying to achieve my basic head proportions, and I'm alt-tabbing between my concept and my ZBrush shell, and just trying to achieve these. Okay. And you're thinking to yourself, well, it'd be nice if I didn't have to alt-tab around. And then there's a few ways you can kind of see your concept while you're working. You can come up here to see through, and you can drag the slider. And as long as your concept is open behind the ZBrush window, you'll be able to see your concept behind. And so this is a great way because ZBrush is still active. As you can see, I'm rotating around. This is a great way to see your concept and continue working on it as needed. But for me, I like to just have dual monitors set up. I know that's easier said than done for some people, but I find that that's the best way because I don't want to get in the way of what's my work area here. So it's ideal that you have a dual monitor setup. All right, let's just say, okay, I want to save this just because I'm happy with the work so far. I'm going to come over here to my tool, and I'm going to do, you could save it two ways. You could hit Control S, like classic anything. You go over here to File, Save, and that's going to save a Z project. And what that includes is everything in ZBrush. So if there's a material on there, if there's lighting, if there's things that you've adjusted to your lighting and shadows and materials, it's going to keep all of your undo history there if that's what you want. And I like that, but I've had zproj files get corrupted on me a lot. So my preferred workflow is to save ZTL. So I'm going to save this actual tool. And to do that, I'm going to come over here and do a save as, and then I'm going to navigate to my work area. So in this case, I'm going to go to Spider Venom, and I'm going to create a folder called 1_Z for ZBrush ZTL. And then right here, I'm going to change this weird name because remember we started with the Nick Z human male to Venom Spidey. And I'm going to do _001 because I want to version my file. Hit save, and now you're good to go. So just keep in mind you won't retain your undo history with a ZTL, but it becomes a much smaller, less corruptible file. It's just safer in my opinion. So, okay, so where were we? So we were learning our brushes and getting our proportions done right, okay? So I'm going to continue to kind of push that forehead out. I like the kind of jutting forehead look of Venom. And then I think my concept, my Alt Tab over, he's got these dinky little stubby, super bulky, bulked out legs. So let's continue to try and push those guys. And then his calves have got to, really kind of pop out. He's got to have. I once worked with a guy that had these proportions exactly, and it was so frustrating because we'd go to lift weights at the gym, and he could just up anything because he had actually pretty short arms, but his giant chest. So it felt like he didn't have to work as hard as the rest of us with our lanky long arms to get the bar up, and it was real frustrating, and that's my story. So just remember that you're rotating around, you're constantly right-clicking and rotating around, okay? And you can right-click right over the character. You'll also notice that you can just left-click outside of your mesh too, and you can rotate. But the problem is if you're on your mesh, then you'll just sculpt. And so I prefer to right-click because then you can right-click right over your character and still rotate around, okay? So let's say we want to just I want to scale these arms up broadly. I don't want to just continue to kind of do this kind of weird snake hook workflow because I'm stretching my polygons and making it look kind of weird. Now I'm going to show you this secret called, it's not a secret, polygroups. If you hit Shift F, Shift plus Frank on your keyboard, you'll see these colors, right? You'll see your topology and you'll see these colors and this fun flattened face that we have here. We have all these awesome colors, and what this allows us to do is isolate different areas of our geometry to work on easily. And so if I hold Control Shift and then mouse over one of the vertices, one of these little points here, and then left click on that, it's going to just show me that one polygroup. So I can isolate these different polygroups, and those are my new work area. But things, I guess I should explain. If I click left click, Control Shift left click on that and hide everything else, everything is not deleted. I can still bring that back by Control Shift left clicking and tapping outside of that. So it'll bring everything back for me. So let's do this. Let's combine all of these. So I'm going to combine all of these polygroups into one arm mesh. Okay, so I can easily just select the arms. And this is how I do it. So Control Shift left click on invert, okay? And now to invert this selection, I can hold Control Shift and then left click and drag a rectangle outside of my geometry, and it'll invert it, okay? And now I can come back here and hold Control Shift left click on another vert, on this vert, this vert, this vert, and so on, all the way until I have sent these. If I Control Shift left click, invert, drag a square, my arms are all over here now, okay? So just practice doing that, switching back and forth. Remember, Control Shift left click a square, and then it'll invert your hidden geometry versus your unhidden geometry. So if I go back to where the hand was, and they'll say, oh, I just want to sort of select this hand and send it to the invisible layer, right? I can hold Control Shift and then drag a rectangle, And then while that's green and while I'm holding Control Shift, I can hold Alt and it'll switch it to red, okay? And voila, so we've sent his arms back to the other visible layer, and now I want these all to be one color. I want them to all be one poly group. In order to do that, I can hit Control W on my keyboard, and now those are all one color. So Control Shift left click tap, and now we've got this all as one color. We can Control Shift left click tap on that guy, and now I want to actually mask these arms, so that I'm only affecting the geometry in the arms. And how you do that is by holding Control on your keyboard. If you come over here to the left, you'll see you're on Mask Pen, and that is your active masking tool. If I were to left click tap on that guy, you'll see all these other interesting masking options. There's a lasso. I typically only use the Mask Pen and the Mask Lasso, although I'm sure these are super capable too. So just leave it on the Mask Pen for now by holding Control on your keyboard. Just remember, so Shift brings up your backup brush, Control brings up your Mask Pen, and then just left clicking is your brush, okay? So let's mask out our arms. I'm gonna hold Control and then left click and drag a mask here. And then Control Shift left click tap, and you'll notice that your arms are darker now and the rest of it is lighter, okay? And if you were to come in here and try to snake hook move this, you'll see I can't move my masked area. I can't click on this arm and move it because it's masked. And the reason I'm showing you this is because masking is super powerful. You're going to use it a ton in your ZBrush workflow. But I want to invert this mask so that I can grab his arm. So I'm going to Control Shift left click tap, and now his arms are the active unmasked area that I can work on. So now if I move it with the snake hook, we can actually move that and not the body. Let's say I want to feather this edge a little bit too. You can Control Shift left click tap and blur that edge. And why did we do all this? Oh, because we want to scale his arms out broadly, like all at the same time. And now that we've got just our arm area unmasked, we can come over here to this scale button and click on scale, and it's going to give us this fun little transform gizmo. And if I were to just click on, like, say, one of these outer arrows, whoa, he's doing this awesome shimmy. That's fun. Undo that. And then you can also select this rotational stuff. So this transform gizmo has your move, your rotate, and your scale all within that tool, okay? So we want to scale. So one thing we want to do is first adjust where our pivot is scaling from. So we can click this little lock here, and now it's unlocked. And now if we move this, we can move it right into the place of the armpit. Make sure you snap to the side so we're getting to the center of the geometry, okay? And then relock your lock. And now I want to scale, and so I'm going to click this little yellow square here and then drag, okay? Sweet. So now we're getting these jacked giant arms, maybe a little too big, but for now, I'm fine with it. And now I'm just rotating with the white circle, okay? And using these arrows to move and pose the character, okay? And I'm dragging him down because I want him to have these nice big traps and kind of a longer neck. And you'll notice that my mask could be blurred a little bit more, so I'm going to Control left click tap on the geometry to blur that, to feather that edge. And then just continue to bring his arms down a little bit, okay? All right, awesome. And now I'm just going to start grabbing my inflate brush and inflating those further. We want him to look crazy, just absolutely bonkers. Okay. So look, his traps are already kind of coming in, so that's nice. And so there's going to be some cleanup. There's always cleanup when you're posing these characters and using your masks and stuff. So I'm going to unmask now because I kind of got those arms in a good spot, and then re-inflate things out. And his pecs have been like kind of weird deformation now. We got to pull those guys down a little bit, pull the front of his neck down, and kind of add this little concavity in his neck area. And then I'm using the Damien standard now, I should mention, to carve in underneath the pecs and just kind of bring back some of the anatomy. And I'm hitting Shift F again to get rid of my poly frame, okay? And I'm liking what I'm doing. I'm liking this, so I'm going to save. You can just hit save right now, or you could hit save next, and it will automatically version up your file, and I'll show you under the hood what it did there. It made a version 2 for me, which is awesome. It doesn't always work when you start to get into different tools. Sometimes that breaks, and you might have to just come back and do a save as, but for now, they're kind of working through it, I think, over there at Maxon. So, all right, cool. So let's continue to push our proportions of this character a little bit. I want to pull his neck out so it's jutting out, fix the back of his head a little bit, and then continue to get the proportions of my Venom. Oh, looks like the back got pretty jacked up a little bit here. So let's continue to pop this stuff in and out. And one thing that's always good to remember when you're modeling is that you should use an in and out kind of workflow. Okay, so I'm not just doing an additive approach where I'm popping stuff out, but I'm also going in. And that's a classic kind of sculpting kind of workflow. Okay, and so let's continue to look at our concept. That's one thing that I forget to do still to this day. Is I kind of just forget, oh, I have a concept, and I should be adhering to that. Because typically, when you're modeling, you have a concept artist that you've been working with, and they worked hard on it, and they've done some great work. So you want to just really try to realize that within your model. So, okay, so I'm gonna hit save real quick, and then do a see-through at this point, and drag it all the way to the right. And I think that my proportions could still be pushed quite a bit. So I'm going to continue to do that using my snake hook. Okay, so stubbier, shorter legs, broader chest and torso area, and just using again the Damien standard to carve in the detail, and then kind of a mix of that and the inflate brush to just kind of bring stuff out. And one thing you'll notice is that I'm seeing all my polygons here, right? And I don't want to see polygons. I want it to be nice and smooth, okay? And so the way you can do that is by subdividing your geometry. So I'm going to save again. I'm a stickler for saving. Remember to save because ZBrush can crash like any other software. So if I drag along the side of the toolbar, it'll show me all these other options, right? I got tons of things I can do over here. And a common one is the geometry drop down. So if you drop that down, you'll see I have all these options available to me, and you will use a lot of these. So the biggest one here is, in this case, is the divide button. Okay, so I want to see more polygons, so I'm going to subdivide my geometry. You'll notice you got more polygons there, right? And let's do it again. And so now we've got 3 subdivision levels, and we can always go back and forth between these by dragging this little slider. Or in the viewport while you're working, this is what I prefer to do, is just hit D on your keyboard to step up to subdivision levels that you've already created, okay? And then to step down, hit Shift plus D, as in Daniel, to go down to your lower subdivision levels, all right? So those are the hotkeys for going up and down, but if I want to create a new subdivision level, I have to go all the way to the top of my subdivs by hitting D. So I'm on subdivision level 3. Say I want to make 4 in the viewport. You just hit Control plus D. And now we see we have a 4th subdivision level. And ZBrush is notorious for handling huge poly counts on even lower end machines. So just be aware you can get these super high, but this could also be a blessing and a curse. And we'll talk about the different workflows of when you should be working in high res versus low res, because there is a huge difference there, okay? So, but we'll cover that as we move along. So I'm going to shift D back to, my 2nd subdivision level, maybe D back up to 3, and then continue to use my Damien standard on and start to carve in some of these details, okay? And another thing that I was going to show you guys is I have created a Pinterest board with a bunch of anatomy. So I'm going to switch back over to my Pinterest board, and in this tab here, I saved a bunch of, there's no nudity in this, just so you know, it's work friendly, but I have a bunch of anatomy saved here. And again, Pinterest is awesome for reference. So this is a really great reference. Look, this is how the back muscles work and things like that. So you can feel free to use these. I'll probably link to these boards in the description, so you can just jump right over to it. You don't have to do that extra work. But we now have a character here, like a skeleton zombie type character, a skinny character. So that's really cool. But just look around at different anatomy. And honestly, the best way to get good at anatomy is just to look at anatomy, and really look at the reference and say, oh, does it go that way? Does it go this way? I love this one because of these sharp edges. I'm going to try to achieve these sharp edges in this particular model, and I'm excited about. So this is one we're going to use. I love these sharp kind of pointed anatomy. But overall, it still fits within reality. So feel free to use this board as a resource, and we're gonna go back and forth to this as we go. I personally have done a lot of modeling of anatomy and muscle structure, so I kind of just know where things should kind of fit, and so I have a leg up there. But just research this, and that's the best way I think to get good at it. So I'll tab back over to our Zbrush shell, and I will continue to sculpt here using my Damien standard. Damien standard for me is like king for getting these details in. So we have these little this little pit right here at the bottom of our bicep, and this little muscle kind of pulls around the side right here. Okay, and one thing that's important, I think, as an artist, is we're trying to eat the whole thing right now, the whole cake, right? And that can be a problem, right? For some of us don't know where to start or when to stop, or where do I even begin, and that's really daunting to us. Well, for me, I like to break things up into large, medium, and fine detailing. Okay, that helps me to kind of compartmentalize my workflow. And so right now, I still consider myself in the large detail workflow. I'm in the large forms. I'm not doing veins yet. I'm not doing wrinkles. I'm not doing tendons, even though I just did. I'm just trying to get the silhouette of this character to work. I'm going to save. So continuing just to Alt-Tab and look over at our concept. I mean, this guy's still way huge, like giant. So let's continue to use our snake hook with a broad brush and just continue to push this guy. We might have to push off our Spiderman Blockout into the next video, but hey, it's fine. We're just going to continue to get super crazy. And again, while you're making these large form adjustments, I recommend staying in lower subdivision levels, so Shift D down to 1 or 2, the first or second subdivision levels, and your polys are going to push around more easily. Your silhouette's going to be more easily adjusted. And if I were to come up here and crank it to 4 and then hit smooth, this is barely going to move. Like, this profile's barely going to move. But if I'm at 2 or 3, then I smooth, you can see it it actually really adjusts it. There are ways around that to work around that by loading different brushes in. But I'm trying to keep everything just stock vanilla ZBrush for learning purposes. I'm not going to use custom brushes or custom tools or anything, custom UI for this, because I want you guys to be able to learn. So I'm just going to use the stock ZBrush stuff to get us where we need to be for this series. So using the Damien standard to carve in this little area, and then remember to go in and out with your brushes. And if you remember how to do that, it was holding Alt to do the inverse of that. And Damien standard is awesome for that, giving you kind of that sharp edge. So I'm doing both left clicking and dragging and Alt left clicking and dragging to go in and out. Okay. So this neck has got to be kind of just a straight line that goes up, and this tendon just kind of connects right behind the jaw. And I'm going to use the inflate brush, which is one of my favorite brushes, to kind of pinch those in and inflate things out. And then again, H polish here to just get rid of some of these details. So we're just getting some sharpness. Damien standard to cut underneath that jaw. A little bit of an Adam's apple there. I don't know if probably just try to maintain that. Scoot it up and back. And then make this jaw kind of jut out a little bit more. Okay. Cool. And stepping up a subdivision level, I'm going to come over here to my Move Topological brush and show you some fun stuff with this. I love this brush. It's one of my favorite brushes. And the reason I like it is because if I were to use the snake hook brush, for example, right here, with this other geo across this little valley right here, if I were to move it, it moves its hip, and I don't want that. If I were to use the Move Topological brush, on the other hand, and still have that close of a geo next to this arm, it's only going to move what's within that topology within our brush size, okay? So I can come over here and move this. I can come over here and move this, and even though it fits within the outer circle of that red circle, it's not going to move it. So that's a really good brush to use if you're trying to just maintain shapes. It gets a little weird sometimes if you're working on super high poly counts. But just remember too, you can come up here. It's only set to a 50 intensity. So if you want more intensity, you can just crank that. Okay. That little joint right there, a little bump in the back of the wrist. Kind of just starting to realize some of our muscle structures a little bit at this subdivision level. Our fingers are looking real weird, but we're gonna get to it. This kind of giant golf ball muscle here on the side, and then using inflate to inflate out the bicep, increase the mass in our character. And then again, we're gonna alt tab back and forth here. I think we're starting to get more in the right territory with our proportions with this guy. And don't forget to save your work. So hit save. I'm gonna use the Damien standard because I love the traps. I want to try and like carve in the traps a little bit better. And they come up here, and there's this little gap right here. And they come up into these tendons that connect to the base of the skull, and it's looking good. Maybe this guy, he's not fully like. Maybe he's got a little bit of, a little bit of flappiness to him. Maybe he's got little bit of some fluffiness. So I'm using the inflate here to give us some mass to that tricep. Okay, and then using the Damien standard to carve our spine all the way down. Okay, and there's a lot of V shapes in human anatomy. A lot of these kinds of deals, right? I was watching a video about anatomy the other day, and this guy was like, he knows the names of all of the muscles and all the tendons. It's like, when you're studying anatomy, that's like your first go-to. I gotta learn the names of everything. And he actually discouraged that, which I thought was interesting. He said that the best thing you can possibly do is just look at anatomy. So my standard brush is still messed up because I changed my focal shift, so I'm gonna increase the size of that. And then decrease my intensity. So he said, just look at anatomy. That's the best way to get good at it. You don't need to know the names of everything. Obviously, the major landmarks, the major muscles is gonna be really good to know. But it's just not necessary because you can get good at it just by looking at reference. So be sure to always be looking at the reference. Damien standard here. So there's some muscles here that kind of pull down towards the armpit. Okay. Pectoralis muscles. And I'm holding Alt again to get that kind of sharp creasing. And then I'm using my H polish to flatten stuff back down and kind of beat this into submission a little bit. Okay, so we got our upper abdominals here, and then we're going to use the Damien standard and scale our brush size way up and sort of carve in where we think those ribs are going to come in, okay? So now we're starting to get a little bit more tone, and then the ribs are an interesting beast because you have these little things that carve in right here, and then there's like an inverse right here, and then there's an inverse, like it's like alternated. And so these ones take a lot of practice. I still feel like I struggle with the rib area anatomy. I still consider myself very much a noob when it comes to this stuff, but again, it's just practicing and getting better and looking at anatomy. So now I'm going to do the inner abs here. They have this little bump right here, and then we're down to the lower ab area here. The thing about comic book characters is it's great anatomy practice, and you're making, you know, characters that you love. So I used to draw these characters a lot when I was really young. Not so much when I'm older. My kids are starting to get into it now. So just remember to be shift smoothing. My kids are getting, you know, really into comic book characters, so I'm kind of starting to get back into it. It's fun. It's fun to see which ones they like and they resonate with. And for me, Spider-Man was always king. I just loved Spider-Man as a kid. So shoulder muscles have always been tricky for me. I know there's these ones right here that kind of pull around the side from the back, and again, we're probably like nitpicking just a little bit too much. And I think also I've got the width here in the front view pretty close to the concept, but now if I rotate this way, he's not wide enough yet, and I want to scale all of him in this direction. Okay, across this way. And the way I can do that is just hit scale, and we'll notice my pivot is off center. So in order to reset your pivot, you can click the lock, hit this little reset orientation button, and then relock it. And then I'm going to click the square, the blue square right here, and scale in that direction. So now we've got some more thickness in that direction. And in this case, I mean, I wanted that, so I'm going to I don't want his face to be so much, so I'm going to scale that back. But I really like that we gave him all generally just more dimension that way. I'm going to widen up, I'm going to withen up his abs here. I'm just going to make up words too as I go. Not the most articulate, but working on it. This little bump down here. You know, I'll know what this is, but I'm not going to try and detail it too much. And then again, another V shape here, and then another V shape, upside down V shape here. It's just anatomy is all just V shapes. So it's a big old hip muscle right here that kind of pours over the side. Cool. And let's go back and hit save. And obviously Venom, you know, Venom doesn't have toes. I mean, he does, but he's got a suit, right? So let's try and get rid of these toes. We're going to do that by just inflating them out. Just doing a broad inflate, okay? And then using my H polish to just push that detailing back. And then I'm using a snake hook to bring those more into like a boot shape. And then comic book characters have these very distinct foot shapes, I've noticed. They kind of have these points on either side. Again, switching between snake hook and H polish and constantly using my smooth brush. So just looking at the bottom here. I'm kind of camping out on the bottom, so it's going to look weird up top. We're seeing those toes now, but I'm going to use my H polish and just push that detailing back. And I want this top part to kind of jut over the bottom. And then reusing my snake hook here, or sorry, my H polish. Okay, whoops. ZBrush navigation, I mean, I've been using it since the very first version of ZBrush. It's always been a little bit tricky. So sometimes you'll just snap into a super weird view and it's a headache, but just stick it out, it's worth it. It's worth the trouble. Damien standard brush, holding Alt to bring out the ankles. Back in along the sides here. I want these ankles to pop. just smoothing a little bit. Let's give him a little bit more of a kneecap area and wrinkles using the Damien standard brush. Okay. And then I want his knees to be just a little bit bigger. I mean, we need to have some big old knees to be handling this hulking mass up here. I kid you not, this guy's proportions look exactly like a guy I used to work with. This wasn't even fair. Okay, going back to my favorite move topological, because I don't want to adjust this arm area here. I just want to bring this guy in. Okay, bring him in. Okay, we're dropping some weight off this guy. Working on our glutes. There's this little knob right here that kind of juts in. And then here, more V shapes underneath. We haven't saved in a while, so I'm just gonna hit save. And then these guys are popped in just a little bit too much, so I'm gonna pop those out. Because of course he's gotta have more mass, more muscle. It's just getting crazy now at this point, it's getting real crazy. Okay, he doesn't have elbows, so one of my favorite brushes is called the clay build-up brush. I think I have that set to 3 on my keyboard. And I'm just gonna pop out some elbow mass here. Okay, that's looking good. And then start carving some of this and bringing up some of this. I can't remember what this muscle is. It's like the radial something, radius. I can't remember. Getting into our trapezius, which is another V shape. Not trapezius. These are your what do you call these things? These are your traps up here. I'm going brain dead. Whenever I get on these videos, I go completely brain dead. Triceps. My goodness, it's ridiculous. Let's add some mass to this elbow. He's got big old elbows. And using the Damien standard, which is just, this part's always a little bit, there's tons of little muscles pushing and pulling right here that go and connect with your finger tendons. So let's take a look at our some reference. I found a good one. Where was that? Let's see. This guy right here. I mean, it might not be 100% accurate, but I kind of like where this is headed. So there's V shapes that are alternating, so let's try that. Looks like there's a muscle that kind of comes in right here, and then one that kind of comes out this way, and then we have this guy. So I'm just doing this, just making broad strokes still. I consider us still in very rough territory. Get some tendons here underneath the palm, and stuff's starting to get in the way here, right? So if you remember, we hit Shift F, we have these guys into polygroups, and we want to hide everything else temporarily. We Control Shift left click on a vert on that polygroup and get everything else out of the way. And now we can see all the weirdness that's happening right here, okay? So let's come in here and just start to refine our hands a little bit. Maybe make the fingers come down to points, like, because Venom has claws, we all know that. And using the Damien standard, turn off my polyframe, Shift F, and then add some sort of like wrinkles. Some saggy skin here, not saggy, but these tendons that come in right here, and then this giant muscle. Okay, and then there's this kind of interesting muscle here too that I have a hard time getting right, but we'll give it a go. Carving this along here, smoothing things back, carve intensely and then smooth things back, a very common workflow. There's also a little interesting bump right here in our anatomy. I don't know what it's called, but it's kind of a nice detail to try and include. Alright, so going back to my snake hook, scaling up my size and just increasing the size of things, and then slowly rotating around and making my adjustments to kind of give the mass to the arms that I want. Okay. And this topology is doing some wonky things because it's real high res up here and then lower res towards the edge, bottom of the bicep. Luckily, we can figure out ways around that later on. Okay, so arms are looking better, I think. Hands are still a mess. Let's continue to work on those. Work on the anatomy there. And again, we're still just thinking, we're thinking big, broad strokes, okay? So let's drop down to our lowest subdivision level and work there for the time being as we're trying to just make these big proportional adjustments. So we don't want them to have these little goofy looking fingers. I'm going to use the move topological brush for most of the work here. Okay, so we can easily adjust the individual fingers, make them longer, pull those guys out a little bit, and then kind of curl those and make them like more relaxed. You know, if you look at your own hand, typically your pinky relaxes the most, and then it kind of feathers off as we move, you know, to the index finger. So make sure we rotate around, get everything, and obviously like these are super flat because we're mostly hitting these at one angle, but we can just inflate those out here in a second. So, okay. And then, okay, so go to inflate, and now I'm just going to scale those up and do like a broad inflate overall. And they're going to start to touch now, but that's normal. We can smooth back a little bit too to try and separate those. Just turn down, you can turn down your smooth intensity by holding shift and coming up here and dragging the slider. And now we've adjusted our smooth intensity a little bit. So working on the knuckle area. The fingers need to, or the thumb, I mean, needs to come in just a little bit, look more relaxed. Hit D, just go up my subdivision level, see how that's looking in the high poly. And if you wanted to play around with this, you could use the snake hook brush, scale it down in size, and kind of pull out some pointiness in the fingers. Because his fingers do that. Okay. And now just keep in mind that when you step down your subdivisions, you might lose these and they might look weird because you don't have the polygons of the low subdivs. And that's fine for now. We're working clean and dirty. Sorry, dirty because we're doing a 3D print, man. It's the advantage of that. Okay, so if I'm Shift D to step down, I guess they kind of work. They do kind of work. He's got claws now. Cool. Okay, so just continuing to adjust these, and I like the points. I like the sharp kind of points in the anatomy. So I'm gonna, using my snake hook, just try and achieve some of that. Like this tricep, instead of being rounded, let's try and add a little bit of a point to it. And a great way to do that is with the Damien Standard brush. You can just go to your Damien Standard and hold Alt, and then it kind of just adds this interesting, like kind of almost like a hard surface vibe to it. And then I'm just using the H polish to kind of clean it up, and then smoothing as well. Okay. Another detail I'd like to add is this, like, there's a little bit of fat that sort of collects up here behind the elbow, and I don't want this guy to be just perfectly, completely ripped. I want him to have a little bit of chub to him, so I'm just going to continue to refine these using the Damien Standard, and then smoothing. You remember we dropped our smooth intensity down quite a bit, so I'm going to bring that back up. And just try to add this like little rim of fat that collects. Cool. So smooth this little sharp edge just down just a smidge. Probably, yeah, it's too intense. That's why you rotate around, right? So you can see how intense this thing's looking at different angles. But I'm still using the H polish to try to incorporate some of that hard surface sharp kind of vibe, because that adds a little bit of sharpness to this guy. Sweet. Okay, so I'm gonna unhide everything by Control-Shift left-clicking. Make sure everything's visible. Okay, and then I'm just gonna hit save and make sure everything's saved. I think this is great for our Blenheim Blockout, just so I can get my Merdswicks up. And this is good. This is great for him. And in the next video, we're gonna move on to our Spider-Man. And then the video following that, we'll dive back into both of these characters and start like adjusting, like we'll give Venom some teeth and a tongue and things like that, and work more on our detailing. So again, this is just the first video. It's probably going to be 5 or 6 videos long, so hang in there and stay with me, and we'll get through this together. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you will be notified when I upload the newest videos. So we'll see you in the next one, where we dive into our Spider-Man Blockout.